Hello. Um, so that was Agatha All Along. I finished watching the episode yesterday, and then I went LARPing, and I've come back. So it's like almost 3 in the morning. But reacting to Agatha All Along, which I mean, I could say with pretty much certainty exceeded expectations. I try not to be a hater. I'm not. I try not to go into shows with like. I try to go into shows with like preemptive expectations, which is usually more of a disadvantage because it usually means I go in and I'm not critical enough. With this show, I didn't see the need in it. I think Agatha worked fairly okay-ish as a villain for WandaVision. Not a great villain because they weren't entirely a foil. I don't think. They were more of a... Most of my criticism is that a lot of the conflict that Agatha brought was very late stage antagonism, which didn't hugely like land. The whole... The best villains are the villains who represent at a metaphysical level the foil of their antagonists, which Agatha wasn't. And it's kind of why you had both Agatha and also that Spear guy both as the kind of the villains, and neither of them hugely like. I mean, also you also had White Vision as well. So when they announced an Agatha spin-off, I was like, this seems like they were entirely creating this because the character was popular because of that one song. And I'm like, well, why are we doing this? But the show, I think, is actually in the same level as Hawkeye and She-Hulk. One of the most consistently delivered shows. A lot of the issues I have in Marvel shows has been their inconsistence, and by what I mean is that they come with a strong premise, you do a lot to deliver that along the way, then they feel they need to kind of complicate it with like other elements, or something else happens and they don't entirely, land the ending. And it leaves you feeling mid. She-Hulk, I'm not quite sure how I feel about She-Hulk's ending, but certainly it was a consistent show throughout. Hawkeye was a consistent show throughout, but a lot of the shows, including WandaVision, had a strong kind of build up and then didn't really succeed in trustling right into the ending. Agatha All Along led into, and I don't know if this is like connected to the fact that it's the first of the shows to rebrand under Marvel Television again. But it does lean into the I'm a butt. You is butt. I are butt. I am butt. I'm not butt. But thank you for the engagement. I appreciate it. And now I've lost my train of thought. I know someone by that name, or someone who used to go by that name. I don't think you are them, but it's very possible that you are. In which case, it knew what it was. It was an episodic show featuring a trial, and each trial examined a conflict that had been pre-established by its character. And it focused on being that with this element of mystery underlining the plot, which is the best way to do it. It's the cleanest way to do it. And then as we get to the end of the show, once we've earned that goodwill, or while we've earned that momentum, then is where we start bringing in the kind of complicated twists, but the complicated twists that build on what's being slowly threaded, rather than something that's coming in completely like left wing. And that's what happened here. So we had the twist last week that was that Lilia was experiencing everything out of order. That I tied into also the twist that Ria was deaf. So that connects the strings together. And then we had another twist this week. I mean, first and foremost, I was initially thinking that the penultimate episode was a bit weak, with the trial, me struggling to get my head around kind of what the trial was. I mean, it was a very strong occult opening, which was the bit where Alice talks to Rio. I do love that part was done so well. Rio was obviously like leaning into a lot of the kind of the stereotypes of death, but in a way that Aubrey Plaza, that kind of Aubrey Plaza twist to it. The whole kind of use of body language and the beckoning towards the end, and Alice being like, I thought I'd have more time, and Death going like, yeah, every time I heard someone say that. But it kind of, it does seem like, you know, it is very kind of stereotypical angel of death moment there. And then the rest of the episode wasn't particularly strong, but we did get some nice moments. I do like the bits where Agatha was kind of just like dealing with people, like she let slip deliberately or not deliberately that Jen was one of the witches that she bound, and so that presents Jen's solution pretty easily. She just needs to do the unbinding ritual, and then that's solved for her. Then she goes and deals with Billy's problem and guides Billy into transferring Tommy's soul into the body of someone who is just drowned. And I love that kind of idea of, you know, the fact that there's so many people dying at any given time, and it's fairly easy to find someone who's in that kind of moment between a veil that you can kind of slip a body into. And it's kind of like ambiguous about kind of what Agatha's kind of whole deal is here about how she feels about Billy, and it's kind of slightly clarified in the next episode, but also not entirely. Like, I'll get into it in a second. I mean, I'll get into this now actually, because I'll forget later on. But so she gives a very kind of, she gives the comment to herself, and usually things that characters say to themselves should be the truth, because, you know, when you're not being witnessed by anyone, why would you lie unless you're lying to yourself? And Agatha doesn't seem the type to who would lie to herself. She seems truthful to herself and manipulative to everyone else. So she gives a line to herself that, you know, sometimes boys just die. And it seems to imply that despite what everyone thinks, she didn't sacrifice Nicholas's life. Nicholas just died. But then that kind of goes against what she said earlier about how when, you know, Death was like, why'd you lie about what happened to Nicholas? And Agatha was like, because what happened, but the truth is so much worse. And if it was just a case of just a death, well, that's not a worse truth. And then later on in the episode, just before she decides to sacrifice herself for Billy, even though she denies that's what she was doing, and maybe she was doing something else, she is prompted to do that because Billy says, you know, is this what happened to Nicholas? Did you give Nicholas his life so you could live longer? And that's enough to kind of guilt her into doing what she did, which kind of implies that it is what happened, and she's kind of undoing herself for that. And then we see the flashbacks, and it's unclear, because in the flashbacks, it just seemed to be that she genuinely wanted to keep Nicholas alive for as long as possible, and Death just happened to take him. But we also don't know why Death was so keen to take him in particular. We don't see what happened before that occurred, but she was certainly running away from Death before she gave birth to Nicholas, so she knew Death was after them. And it was like, well, did you make a deal beforehand? Is this like kind of a Rumpelstiltskin situation? Hopefully that gets clarified. I guess the alternative is that I've just missed the ball completely here, and I've misunderstood. But there seems to be some ambiguity there from my interpretation. I'm hoping this gets addressed. So once Agatha gets out of the trial, it's basically a spell slinging ending between her and Rio, but I guess perhaps in a way that's them learning them lessons from WandaVision. That's not actually the focus of the fight, and in fact we don't actually see much of it. We see like glimpses, but we cut away from the action to basically empower the point that it's not really the point of the scene. Agatha knows she can't beat Rio, and Rio isn't particularly concerned about Agatha's attack, so it doesn't really matter to her to see what's going on. They do prolong the session of Agatha taking Billy's power, so you're not quite sure if she'll like let go or not, but she does eventually. And eventually they kind of have to succumb to the choice of either sacrificing themselves or sacrificing Billy, and she seems like wholeheartedly willing to sacrifice Billy for her own life, which is consistent with what's going on so far. Agatha has an ace up her sleeve, but she walks away, and it's only after Billy seemingly taunts her that she goes back and gives her life. And again, this ties into what I'm just saying. It's unclear if that taunt was legit, what was going on there. Later on, she says she didn't sacrifice herself and it was a targeted risk. Is that her lying, or is that her telling the truth? It's unclear. And I don't mind if this is unanswered, but I think it needs confirmation that this is deliberate unclarity and not just poor storytelling. It is quite a somewhat sweet scene to like see Agatha's body decompose and then like be created into like flowers, and it kind of ties into the Green Witch being about the cycle. It's a very long story, and I say that and I realise actually no one knows what long story is. It's a reference to the Fools and Hero LARP system. That was just that, and I'm like, oh wait, this isn't actually a thing people understand. And then we get what I think was actually the best twist in the show, and perhaps in a lot of Marvel shows, that Billy did a wonder. Billy actually created the entire fiction of everything we've been seeing in the last couple of episodes, unintentionally, a lot like Wanda did. And that's so clever that basically the road is just a manifestation of what he expected the road to be based on things around his room about witch culture. That was very clever. That was a reveal I was not expecting. I'm like, oh gosh, that's actually so clever. And then with Agatha being dead, that actually leads us to an interesting situation where we, instead of getting a finale, we get a coda. We get an episode which is basically an epilogue. The plot is basically finished. So we get a flashback that recontextualizes Agatha. And again, we don't know really why Death wants Nicholas. But we see, Agatha growing up. And it's not like, something tragic happened and it turned her. She was always quite murderous towards other witches, but she seems to be driven by the need to protect and the need to have power and the need to survive. And which I guess humanizes the decision anyway. And then we see that obviously once Nicholas dies, she creates the Witch's Road as a con, which is nice because the entire time we were given the implication that Agatha didn't actually know, hasn't actually walked the road before. And I'm like, well, why would she lie about that? But it's because she made it up. And so she doesn't lie. She is the authority on the road because she made it up. Lots of none of it exists. And you get the reveal that her original plan was just basically to taunt the witches like she's done before into attacking her so she can steal her power. And fortunately, that's not actually what happened. It is able to happen and the road is created instead. But as a result, well, actually, Alice, Lila, and I did miss this. Sharon wouldn't have died because Sharon had no power to give. So when Agatha's whole thing about actually you saved her life because Jen's alive now and wouldn't have otherwise been, well, if the plan had worked, Jen, Alice, and Lila would have all died and Sharon would have survived. So it's not, the maths doesn't actually work out, but I guess don't have to believe that. There are some bit lack of clarity here about motivations and stuff, but nothing huge. And we end in a coda with them basically, I guess, pledging to. Agatha seems fairly happy actually with being dead as a ghost. Sort of unsure where that's come from, but apparently now we're going to get this kind of force ghost situation where Ghost Agatha guides Billy in finding Tommy, whether that's to do with Another season, I don't know, but I think this show has exceeded expectations. It's not perfect. I think what it does is it essentially it didn't try to be more clever than it had a scope to do, and because it took that approach, it worked. That's essentially what happened here. Okay, well, those are my thoughts on the show. I am probably gonna finish my food and then go to sleep. That'd be the wise thing to do, rather than stay up late gaming, as much as I would like to. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and that's Agatha All Along. We've still got more Lower Decks to watch, and then I think in a month's time we've got Skeleton Crew. So see you later all. Bye.